The council chamber of the Northern Territories was built to intimidate. High stone walls rose 3 stories, their surfaces covered in carvings that depicted the great battles of the past. Windows set near the ceiling let in shafts of cold morning light that fell across the long table where the Alpha Council sat in judgment. Carrie stood at the far end of that table with her hands folded and her eyes down, trying to make herself small. It was a skill she'd perfected over the years, the art of taking up as little space as possible, of being so quiet and unremarkable that people forgot she was there. But today, standing in front of 7 alphas who held the power of life and death over her and her son, invisibility felt impossible. Her son Finn stood beside her, one small hand gripping the fabric of her worn dress. He was 8 years old, thin and wiry, with dark hair that fell into eyes the same gray-green as Carrie's own. Unlike her, Finn had never learned the art of making himself small. He stood with his shoulders back and his chin up, meeting the gaze of each alpha in turn with a directness that made Carrie's heart clench with fear and pride in equal measure. Carrie of the Silver Creek Pack. Alpha Torn of the Northern Council spoke from his seat at the center of the table. He was an older wolf, gray-haired and stern, with the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile decades ago. You stand before this council to petition for sanctuary. Explain why Silver Creek has cast you out. Carrie kept her eyes down. The truth was complicated and humiliating, but there was no point in lying. The alphas would smell deception, and besides, they probably already knew. News traveled fast between packs. My mate died 2 years ago, Alpha Torn. Without his protection, I became a burden to the pack. When I couldn't keep up with the work quotas, when I had to care for my son instead of serving the pack house, they decided we were more trouble than we were worth. You were cast out for being weak. Alpha Moira spoke from Torn's left. She was younger than Torn, but no less severe, with pale blonde hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. For failing to contribute adequately to your pack's resources. It wasn't a question, but Carrie answered anyway. Yes, Alpha Moira. And now you come here, asking the Northern Territories to take on that same burden. This from Alpha Rask, a massive man with scars across his face and hands that suggested a lifetime of fighting. Why should we waste resources on an Omega who cannot pull her weight? Carrie's hands tightened in the fabric of her dress. She'd known this would be hard. She'd known the council would see her as she'd always been seen, as something weak and useless, barely worth the food it took to keep her alive. But she'd hoped. Against all reason, she'd hoped that somewhere in these territories there might be a pack that would see her as something more. I can work, Alpha Rask. I can clean, cook, mend, tend gardens. I won't be a burden. And my son, her voice caught. My son is smart. He learns quickly. He could be useful to whichever pack takes us in. Your son is 8 years old. Alpha Torn's voice was flat. He won't be useful for years yet. And you? He paused, looking at her with something that might have been pity in a kinder man. You are barely useful now. The Northern Territories have no place for wolves who cannot contribute. I'm sorry, but this council denies your petition for sanctuary. The words hit like a physical blow. Carrie felt her knees go weak, felt the room tilt around her. Denied. They denied her. She and Finn had nowhere to go, no pack to take them in, and winter was coming. Without pack protection, without access to pack resources, they would freeze or starve long before spring. Please. The word escaped before she could stop it. Please. There must be somewhere. Some pack that needs workers. I'll do anything. I'll take any position no matter how low. Just please don't send us away. Mama. Finn's voice was quiet but firm. His hand squeezed hers. Mama. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. Alpha Torn stood, signaling the end of the hearing. The council has spoken. You have until sunset to leave Northern Territory lands. If you're found here after dark, you'll be treated as rogues. You know what that means." Carrie knew. Rogues were killed on sight, no trial, no mercy. Just a quick death if they were lucky, a slow one if they weren't. She turned to leave, pulling Finn with her, but he resisted. "Wait," he said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "What about the mute pup?" The chamber went silent. The alphas stared at Finn, and Carrie felt ice flood her veins. What was he talking about? What mute pup? Alpha Torn's expression darkened. "That is none of your concern, boy." But Finn didn't back down. "I heard the guards talking when we were waiting. They said there's a pup who can't speak and no pack will take him. They said he's been passed around for months, and now he's here, waiting for the council to decide what to do with him." "Finn, stop." Carrie tried to pull him toward the door, but he planted his feet. "Is it true?" Finn looked at each alpha in turn. "Is there a pup nobody wants?" Alpha Moira's jaw tightened. "There is a situation involving a young wolf who has proven difficult to place. But again, this is not your concern. What will you do with him?" Finn's voice was steady, but Carrie could hear the edge of something fierce underneath. "If no pack wants him, what happens?" The alphas exchanged glances. Finally, Alpha Torn spoke. "He'll be placed with the healers, given basic care until he's old enough to survive on his own, and then released to make his own way as a lone wolf. He's 5 years old." This from a voice at the back of the chamber. Carrie turned to see a woman in healer's robes standing by the door. She was older, with silver-gray hair and tired eyes. "He's 5 years old, and he's been rejected by 6 packs in 4 months. None of them wanted to deal with a pup who can't communicate, who can't call for help, who might never be able to contribute properly to pack hierarchy. So they've passed him along until he ended up here, at the end of the line. And now you're going to warehouse him with the healers until he's 12 or 13 and then turn him out to fend for himself, knowing he'll likely die within a year because lone wolves without strong communication skills don't survive long." The healer's voice was bitter, and Carrie understood why. She was describing a death sentence, just one that would take years instead of days. "Healer Greta." Alpha Torn's voice carried a warning. "You overstep. Someone needs to." Greta crossed her arms. "That child has been in my care for 2 weeks, and in that time I've watched him retreat further into himself every day. He doesn't trust anyone anymore. Why would he? Every pack he's been sent to has rejected him. Every adult he's met has looked at him and found him wanting. He's 5 years old, and he's already learned that the world sees him as broken and disposable." Finn pulled free from Carrie's grip and turned to face Alpha Torn. "We'll take him." The chamber erupted in noise. Several alphas started speaking at once, but Carrie couldn't hear them over the roaring in her ears. What was Finn thinking? They couldn't take in another child. They had no home, no pack, no resources. They could barely survive on their own, let alone with a 5-year-old pup who needed special care. But Finn was still talking. "You said we couldn't stay because we'd be a burden. But if we take the pup, we're solving a problem for you. You don't want him, and you don't want us, so let us go together. We'll leave the territories, find somewhere else to go, and you won't have to worry about any of us anymore." "Absolutely not." Alpha Moira's voice cut through the chaos. "That child is under Northern Territory protection, however minimal. We will not hand him over to a pair of refugees who can't even secure sanctuary for themselves." "You were going to send him away anyway." Finn's voice rose. "You said you'd turn him out when he was old enough. So what's the difference if he leaves now with us instead of alone in 7 years? At least this way, he'd have someone who wants him." "Finn, stop." Carrie found her voice at last. She grabbed her son's shoulders and turned him to face her. "Stop this. We can't take a pup. We can't even take care of ourselves." "But Mama..." "No." She said it firmly, even though her heart was breaking at the look on his face. "I know you want to help. I know you have a good heart. But we can't save everyone, and we definitely can't save a pup who needs more than we have to give." Finn's eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them back. "He's 5, Mama. The same age I was when Papa died. Remember how scared I was? How I used to have nightmares and wake up crying? You helped me through that. You told me I was safe, that everything would be okay. Who's going to tell him that? Who's going to help him through his nightmares?" Carrie pulled Finn against her chest, holding him tight while her heart shattered into pieces. Because he was right. She remembered those dark months after her mate's death, when Finn had been so small and frightened, when she'd spent night after night holding him and promising him safety she wasn't sure she could deliver. And now there was another pup, even younger, facing even worse fear and loneliness, and there was nothing she could do about it. "I'm sorry," she whispered into Finn's hair. "I'm so sorry, baby. But we can't." "Then at least let me meet him." Finn pulled back to look at her. "Please, Mama, just let me say goodbye before we go. He should know that someone cared, even if we can't help." Carrie looked up at the council table. Alpha Torn was watching them with an unreadable expression. "Please," she said quietly, "just a few minutes. Then we'll leave and never come back." Alpha Torn studied them for a long moment. Then he nodded to healer Greta. "Show them. 5 minutes, no more." Greta led them out of the council chamber and down a long corridor to the healer's wing. The building was quieter here, with thick walls that muffled sound and large windows that let in plenty of light. Greta stopped at a door near the end of the hall and knocked softly before opening it. "Ash," she called gently. "You have visitors." The room was small but comfortable, with a narrow bed, a chest for clothes, and a window that looked out over the pack grounds. Sitting on the floor by the window was a small figure with white blonde hair and pale skin that suggested he didn't spend much time outside. Ash didn't turn when they entered. He kept his attention fixed on something in his hands, a small wooden carving of a wolf. His fingers traced the curves of the wood with careful precision, following the same path over and over in a pattern that seemed to soothe him. Carrie felt her breath catch. He was so small. Smaller than Finn had been at 5, thin to the point of being fragile. He wore simple clothes that were clean but worn, and his feet were bare despite the cold stone floor. Finn stepped forward slowly, and Carrie let him go. He crossed the room and sat down on the floor next to Ash, mimicking the boy's cross-legged position. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Finn pulled something from his pocket, a small stone he'd found that morning, smooth and flat with interesting markings. He didn't say anything. He just held it out, offering it to Ash without expectation or demand. Ash's fingers stilled on the wooden wolf. Slowly, carefully, he turned his head to look at Finn. His eyes were an unusual color, pale blue-gray like winter ice, and they held a wariness that no 5-year-old should know. He looked at Finn for a long moment, then at the stone, then back to Finn's face. Finn smiled. Not the big bright smile he usually wore, but something softer, gentler. He placed the stone on the floor between them and waited. Ash looked at the stone. His fingers twitched like he wanted to reach for it, but wasn't sure if he was allowed. Finn very carefully picked up the stone and placed it directly in front of Ash, then put his hands in his lap to show he wasn't going to take it back. Ash picked up the stone. He held it the same way he'd held the wooden wolf, tracing the markings with careful fingers. A small sound escaped him, not a word, but something that might have been pleasure or curiosity. Then Ash did something that made Carrie's heart skip. He set down the wooden wolf and held out the stone to Finn, offering it back. But Finn shook his head. He pointed to Ash, then to the stone, then mimed putting it in a pocket. "Yours," he was saying. "Keep it." Ash's eyes widened. He looked at the stone, then at Finn, then carefully tucked the stone into his own pocket. And then, wonder of wonders, he smiled. Just a little, just for a second. but it transformed his face from wary to something that looked almost like hope. Finn raised his hand and moved it in a gesture, palm forward, fingers spread, then closing into a fist over his heart. Carrie didn't know what it meant, but Ash seemed to understand. He stared at Finn's hand, then slowly, haltingly, repeated the gesture himself. How? Healer Greta's voice was hushed. How did you know that sign? Finn glanced back at her. My papa taught me. He said his grandmother was deaf, and she taught him hand signs so they could talk. He taught me before he died. Not many, but some. That one means friend. Carrie felt tears burning in her eyes. She'd forgotten that. Her mate had spent hours teaching Finn signs, treating it like a game. Finn had been so proud when he could spell out simple words with his hands, and apparently he'd remembered. Ash knows signs? Greta sounded amazed. I've been trying to communicate with him for weeks with no success. He knows some. Finn turned back to Ash and made another gesture, fingers forming shapes that Carrie vaguely recognized. He just spelled thank you. Sort of. He's mixing up some letters, but I understand. Ash's hands moved again, faster this time, more confident. Finn watched closely, his brow furrowed in concentration. He's asking, I think he wants to know if I'll come back. Carrie's heart broke. Finn. But Finn was already shaking his head at Ash, his expression sad. He made a series of signs, slow and clear, and Ash's face fell. The hope that had lit his eyes moments ago flickered and died. What did you tell him? Greta asked quietly. That we have to leave, that I'm sorry. Finn's voice was thick, that I wish we could stay. Ash's hands moved again, quick and desperate. Finn reached out and gently caught them, stilling the frantic gestures. He made one last sign, both hands over his heart, then extended toward Ash. I told him, I'll remember him, Finn whispered. That's all I can promise. The 5 minutes were up. Carrie knew without being told that they'd pushed the council's patience as far as it would go. She stepped forward and put her hand on Finn's shoulder. We have to go, baby. Finn nodded. He stood slowly, and Ash scrambled to his feet as well. For a moment, they stood facing each other. Two young boys who'd found an unexpected connection in the space of 5 minutes. Then Finn wrapped his arms around Ash in a quick, fierce hug. When he pulled back, Ash's eyes were wide and wet, but no tears fell. He clutched the stone Finn had given him like it was the most precious thing in the world. Carrie led Finn out of the room and back down the hallway. Greta followed them, her footsteps soft on the stone floor. At the entrance to the healer's wing, she stopped them. I need to tell you something. Greta's voice was low, urgent. About Ash, about why he can't speak. Carrie shook her head. It doesn't matter. We can't take him, no matter the reason. It matters because it's not permanent. Greta grabbed Carrie's arm. He can speak, or he could once. He was born normal, started talking at the usual age. But 8 months ago, his pack was attacked by rogues. His parents were killed. He watched it happen. And since that day, he hasn't spoken a single word. Carrie's stomach turned. Trauma? The physical healers say there's nothing wrong with his vocal cords, his throat, his tongue. Everything works. He just can't, or won't. The mind healers think that if he felt safe enough, if he had enough time and support, he might speak again. But no pack has been willing to invest that time. They see a mute pup and assume he'll always be mute, that he'll never be able to howl with the pack or call for help or participate in hunts, so they reject him, and every rejection makes it worse. Why are you telling me this? Carrie's voice came out harsher than she intended. What do you want me to do? I want you to know that the child your son just befriended isn't broken. He's hurt. There's a difference. And your son. Greta looked back toward the healer's wing. Your son saw that difference in 5 minutes. He didn't see a mute pup. He saw a child who needed a friend. That's rare. That's special. That's also not enough to keep us alive. Carrie pulled free from Greta's grip. I'm sorry. I truly am. But we can't help him. We can't help anyone. She took Finn's hand and led him toward the exit. Behind them, healer Greta called out one last time. The Eastern Territories, the Frost Ridge Pack is small, and they're struggling. They lost a lot of wolves to illness last winter, and they need anyone who can work. Try there. It's your last chance. Carrie didn't look back. She couldn't. If she looked back, she might see Greta's face, or worse, might see Ash watching from a window. And if she saw that, she might do something stupid. Something that would get all three of them killed. They collected their meager belongings from the Traveler's Lodge and started walking. The sun was high now, and they had maybe 6 hours before sunset. 6 hours to clear Northern Territory lands or face execution as rogues. Finn was silent as they walked, his small hand gripping Carrie's tightly. He didn't cry, didn't complain, didn't ask questions. But Carrie could feel his grief and guilt like a physical weight between them. You did a good thing back there, she said finally. You gave him something precious. A moment of connection, of friendship. That matters, even if we can't stay. It's not enough. Finn's voice was flat. He's going to be alone again, for years, until they turn him out to die. I know. What else could she say? He was right. But we can't save everyone, Finn. Sometimes all we can do is show kindness and hope it makes a difference. That's a terrible lesson. Carrie's throat tightened. I know that too. They walked in silence for another hour, following the path that would lead them to the Eastern Territories. If healer Greta was right about Frost Ridge Pack needing workers, they might have a chance. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. Carrie was so focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on making plans and calculating distances, that she almost didn't hear it. A small sound, barely more than a rustle in the underbrush behind them. She turned, her hand instinctively pushing Finn behind her. And there, emerging from the trees with a healer's satchel clutched in both hands, was Ash. Carrie's heart stopped. For a moment, she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Ash stood 10 feet away, his pale hair wild from running, his chest heaving with exertion. The healer's satchel was too big for him, hanging almost to his knees, and he wore a cloak that dragged on the ground behind him. He'd run away. A 5-year-old pup had run away from the healer's wing from the Northern Territory Pack Center to follow them into exile. No, Carrie breathed. No, you can't be here. Ash didn't move. His eyes were fixed on Finn with an intensity that made Carrie's chest ache. Finn pulled free from her grip and took a step toward Ash. Did you follow us? Finn asked. Ash nodded, the whole way. Another nod. Why? Ash's hands moved in a flurry of signs. Finn watched carefully, then looked up at Carrie. He says he'd rather die with us than live alone. He says at least if he dies, he'll die with someone who saw him as a person, instead of a problem. Carrie felt tears burning in her eyes. Finn, we have to take him back. If they find out he's gone, if they think we took him, we didn't take him. He followed us. Finn moved closer to Ash. And Mama, look at him. Really look. He ran miles through the forest by himself to catch up with us. He's brave and determined, and he found a way to escape the healer's wing without anyone stopping him. That's not nothing. That's also not our responsibility. But even as Carrie said it, she knew it was a lie. Ash was already their responsibility. From the moment Finn had sat down next to him and offered him a stone, from the moment that child had smiled for the first time in months, they'd created a bond. And bonds meant responsibility. She looked at Ash. Really looked, the way Finn had said. He was small and thin, yes. Fragile looking, but there was something in his eyes, in the set of his shoulders, that suggested steel underneath the delicate exterior. He'd survived his parents' murder. He'd survived being passed from pack to pack like an unwanted burden. And now, he'd survived running alone through miles of forest to catch up with refugees who had nothing to offer him but companionship in poverty. "If we take you with us," Carrie said slowly, "there's no guarantee we'll survive. We have no pack, no home, barely any supplies. We're heading to Frost Ridge on the hope, just the hope, that they might take us in. If they don't, we'll be wandering through winter with nothing. You understand that?" Ash nodded. His hands moved in signs that Carrie couldn't read, but Finn translated. "He says he knows. He says anywhere is better than alone, even nowhere." Carrie closed her eyes and said a prayer to whatever gods might be listening. Then she held out her hand to Ash. "Come here then. If you're going to be with us, you stay close. No running off, no wandering. We can't protect you if we can't see you. Understood?" Ash flew across the distance between them and grabbed Carrie's hand with both of his. Up close, she could see tear tracks on his cheeks, could feel how his small body trembled. She knelt down and pulled him into a hug, and Ash collapsed against her with a sound that might have been a sob if he'd had a voice to sob with. "It's okay," she whispered, rocking him gently. "It's okay now. We've got you." Finn wrapped his arms around both of them, and for a moment they stayed like that. 3 refugees with nothing but each other, huddled on a forest path in the fading afternoon light. When they finally pulled apart, Carrie took stock of what Ash had brought with him. The healer's satchel contained bandages, some dried herbs, a water flask, and a small amount of dried meat and bread. The cloak was warm, but too large. He wore decent boots at least, and his clothes, while simple, were sturdy. "Did Healer Greta give you these things?" Carrie asked. Ash shook his head and signed something. Finn translated. "He says he took them. From the supply room. He says he's sorry for stealing, but he didn't know what else to do." "You're not in trouble," Carrie assured him. "But if Greta notices supplies missing, she'll know you ran. We need to move fast, get as far from here as possible before they send trackers." They started walking again, this time with Ash between them. Finn held his hand and chattered quietly, a one-sided conversation that Ash followed with careful attention. Occasionally, Ash's hands would move in response, and Finn would nod or laugh or ask another question. Carrie watched them, and felt something shift in her chest. Finn had been quiet for so long since his father's death, not silent like Ash, but subdued, as if he'd learned to swallow his natural exuberance to avoid drawing attention. But now, walking with Ash, teaching him signs and telling him stories, Finn was coming alive again. His eyes were bright, his voice animated. He looked like a child instead of a tiny adult trying to navigate an impossible situation. And Ash? Ash was watching Finn like he'd hung the moon. Every gesture Finn made, every word he spoke, Ash absorbed with total focus. When Finn showed him a new sign, Ash practiced it until he got it right. When Finn pointed out birds in the trees or interesting rocks by the path, Ash looked where he pointed with genuine curiosity. They were good for each other, Carrie realized. Finn needed someone to teach, someone to care for. It gave him purpose, made him feel useful instead of burdensome. And Ash needed someone who saw past his silence to the person underneath, someone who didn't treat him like he was broken. They walked until darkness fell, and Carrie could no longer see the path clearly. She found a sheltered spot off the trail, a small clearing surrounded by thick bushes that would hide them from view and block some of the wind. They had no tent, no bedrolls, just the clothes on their backs and the single cloak Ash had brought. "We'll take turns sleeping," Carrie decided. 2 awake, 1 sleeping, rotating through the night. That way someone's always on watch. "I'll take first watch," Finn volunteered. Ash should sleep first. He ran a long way today. Ash shook his head firmly and signed something. Finn smiled. "He says we should both sleep and he'll keep watch. He's used to not sleeping much anyway." "Absolutely not." Carrie's voice was firm. "You're 5 years old, Ash. You're not staying up alone in the dark forest while we sleep. Finn and I will take the watches. You sleep. Ash's shoulders slumped, but he didn't argue. Carrie wrapped the cloak around both boys and settled them against a fallen log where they'd have some back support. Finn immediately started arranging things so Ash would be more comfortable, putting leaves under his head for a pillow, making sure the cloak covered his feet. Tell him a story, Carrie suggested. Something happy. Finn thought for a moment, then began signing while he spoke out loud. There was once a kingdom made entirely of clouds. The wolves who lived there could walk on air, and they spent their days racing through the sky, leaping from cloud to cloud. The fastest wolf in the kingdom was named Storm, and she had silver fur that shone like lightning. Carrie watched Ash's face as Finn spun his tail, signing the important words so Ash could follow. The little boy's eyes grew heavy. His breathing slowed. By the time Finn reached the end of the story, Ash was asleep, his head resting on Finn's shoulder. You're good with him, Carrie said quietly, once she was sure Ash was truly asleep. Finn shrugged. He's easy to be good with. He listens, and he tries so hard to understand. Most adults don't listen that well. Most adults aren't as patient as you either. Papa was patient. He taught me that patience is just another word for kindness stretched over time. Finn's voice caught on his father's name. I miss him, Mama. I know, baby. I miss him too. Carrie didn't add that she missed the good parts of her mate, the patient teacher who'd shown Finn how to track animals and read weather signs, the parts that had come before the drinking and the anger. He'd be proud of you, of the way you've helped Ash. Do you think we can keep him? Really, keep him, I mean. Make him part of our family? Carrie looked at Ash's sleeping face, peaceful in a way she suspected it hadn't been for months. I don't know if we can give him everything he needs, but we can try. That's all anyone can do. Try. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the forest. Eventually, Carrie convinced Finn to sleep while she took first watch. He curled up next to Ash, and soon both boys were breathing deeply, exhausted from the day's events. Carrie sat with her back against a tree and let herself feel the full weight of what she'd taken on. 3 mouths to feed when she could barely feed 2. 3 bodies to clothe and shelter. 3 lives depending on her to make good choices when she'd spent the last 2 years proving she couldn't keep even herself and Finn safe. But when she looked at those 2 small bodies huddled together under the too large cloak, when she saw Finn's arm thrown protectively over Ash even in sleep, she couldn't regret it. Whatever happened, at least Ash wouldn't face it alone. And neither would Finn. The night passed slowly. Carrie woke Finn for his watch around midnight, and he settled in with the alertness of a child who'd learned too young that the world was dangerous. Carrie slept fitfully, waking at every sound, until Finn woke her again near dawn. I kept seeing eyes in the dark, Finn whispered, just watching us. I don't think they were dangerous, but it's better not to take chances. Carrie rubbed her face and stood, every muscle aching from sleeping on cold ground. Let's wake Ash and get moving. The sooner we reach Frost Ridge, the better. Ash woke easily, his eyes flying open at the first gentle touch on his shoulder. For a moment he looked terrified, as if he'd forgotten where he was. Then he saw Finn and Carrie, and his expression melted into relief. They shared the small amount of food from Ash's satchel, bread that was already going stale, and strips of dried meat that required serious chewing. It wasn't much, but it was enough to take the edge off their hunger. Carrie refilled the water flask from a stream they passed, and they continued east. As they walked, Finn taught Ash more signs, basic ones at first: hungry, tired, cold, afraid. Then more complex ideas: safe, family, together. Ash learned quickly, his small hands forming the shapes with increasing confidence. Soon he was signing back, asking questions, making jokes that required both signing and exaggerated expressions to convey. Finn laughed at something Ash signed, and Carrie asked what he'd said. He wants to know if the Cloud Kingdom from last night's story is real. He says if it is, we should go there instead of Frost Ridge, because walking on air would be easier than walking on this path. Carrie smiled despite her worry. Tell him that if we find the Cloud Kingdom, we'll definitely apply for citizenship. They walked all day, stopping only briefly to rest when Ash's short legs couldn't keep up anymore. Carrie carried him for stretches, though he protested through increasingly emphatic signs. He was lighter than Finn had been at 5, easy to carry but also concerning. The child needed regular meals and time to grow, neither of which they could guarantee. Late in the afternoon of their second day of travel, they crested a hill and saw smoke rising in the distance. A lot of smoke, from many fires. A pack center. Frost Ridge, Carrie breathed. We made it. But now came the hard part, convincing them to take in not just an Omega and her son, but also a mute pup that 6 other packs had rejected. They approached slowly, following the main road that led to the pack center. Unlike the Northern Territory's imposing stone structures, Frost Ridge was built of wood, log buildings with steep roofs to shed snow, connected by covered walkways that would provide shelter during harsh winters. It was smaller than Carrie had expected, maybe 24 buildings clustered around a central square. Guards stopped them at the outer perimeter. They were young, probably barely old enough to have earned their warrior marks, and they looked uncertain about what to do with 3 bedraggled travelers who showed up at sunset. State your business, one of them said, trying to sound authoritative and mostly succeeding. We're seeking sanctuary, Carrie said, keeping her voice respectful and her eyes down. We were told Frost Ridge Pack might need workers. The guards exchanged glances. Wait here, the other one said, and disappeared into the pack center at a run. They waited. Ash pressed against Carrie's side, and she could feel him shaking. Finn took his hand and signed something that made Ash's shoulders relax slightly. The guard returned with a woman who looked to be in her 40s, gray-streaked black hair pulled back in a practical braid. She wore work clothes, sturdy pants and a warm tunic, and her hands were stained with what looked like plant dyes. I'm Beta Sina, she said without preamble. These guards say you're asking for sanctuary. From where? Silver Creek Pack originally, Beta Sina. We were cast out and denied sanctuary by the Northern Territories. We're hoping Frost Ridge might have work for us. Sina looked them over with sharp eyes that missed nothing, their thin frames, worn clothes, the way they stood close together like pack animals seeking comfort. Her gaze lingered on Ash. That's a lot of children, she said flatly. Can't feed ourselves, let alone extra mouths. I can work, Carrie said quickly. Any job you have. Cleaning, cooking, mending, fieldwork, anything. I'm strong, and I learn fast. And the boys? Finn is 8. He can help with chores, run messages, assist with simpler tasks. And Ash? Who's Ash? This one. Carrie put her hand on Ash's shoulder. He's with us. He can also help with age-appropriate work. Sina's eyes narrowed. How old is he? 5. 5-year-olds aren't useful. They're liabilities. Why are you traveling with someone else's pup? This was it, the moment where everything could fall apart. Carrie took a breath and told the truth. He was being held by the Northern Territories, waiting for placement. No pack would take him because he's mute. He chose to come with us instead of staying there alone. Sina's expression hardened. So you stole him? No. Finn stepped forward. He ran away. He followed us because he wanted to. We didn't steal him. Does the Northern Territory Council know he's gone? Probably by now, yes. So they could be sending trackers, could show up here demanding we return him. Sina crossed her arms. That's a diplomatic nightmare I don't need. We're barely holding on as it is. Can't afford to antagonize the Northern Territories. We'll leave, Carrie said quickly. We won't cause you problems. We'll just... She looked around at the darkening forest at the two exhausted children clinging to her. "We'll find somewhere else." "There is nowhere else." Sina's voice was blunt, but not unkind. "You know that. Frost Ridge is the last pack for 300 miles. If we turn you away, you're facing winter in the wilderness with two small children." "I know." Sina was quiet for a long moment, studying them. Then she sighed, a sound that carried the weight of too many hard decisions. "You're lucky our alpha has a soft spot for strays. Come with me." She led them through the pack center. Wolves stopped to stare as they passed, curious, wary, some openly hostile. Carrie kept her eyes down and her hands on the boys' shoulders, steering them through the crowd. They stopped at the largest building, a two-story lodge with smoke rising from multiple chimneys. Sina knocked once and entered without waiting for a response. The interior was warm and dimly lit, with a large hearth crackling with fire. A man sat at a desk near the window, papers spread out before him. He looked up as they entered, and Carrie felt her breath catch. He was younger than she'd expected for an alpha, maybe 35, with golden brown hair and amber eyes that seemed to glow in the firelight. He wore simple clothes, but there was no mistaking the power that radiated from him, or the way Sina immediately deferred to his authority. "Alpha Eric," Sina said, "these three are seeking sanctuary. Omega from Silver Creek, cast out and denied by the Northern Territories. She's willing to work, and she's brought two pups with her." Eric stood and came around the desk, moving with the fluid grace of a natural predator. He stopped a few feet away, and Carrie forced herself to meet his eyes briefly before looking down again. "Your name?" His voice was deep, but not harsh. "Carrie. Alpha Eric. This is my son Finn, and this is Ash." "Ash." Eric's gaze focused on the white-blonde child, half hidden behind Carrie. "The mute pup from the Northern Territories." Carrie's stomach dropped. "You've heard of him?" Word travels fast between packs, especially when it involves a child being passed around like a burden no one wants to carry. Eric crouched down to Ash's level. "Hello, Ash. I'm Eric. Can you look at me?" Ash kept his eyes fixed on the floor. Finn signed something quickly, and Ash's hands moved in response. "What did he say?" Eric asked Finn. "He says he's sorry for being a burden. He says if you don't want him here, he understands, but please let my mama and me stay because we didn't do anything wrong." Eric's expression softened. "Look at me, Ash." It was a gentle command, but a command nonetheless. Slowly, Ash raised his eyes. "You're not a burden. You're a child, and children are never burdens. They're investments in the future. Do you understand?" Ash's eyes widened. He nodded slowly. "Good. Now, here's what's going to happen. All three of you are going to stay here tonight. Beta Sina will find you a place to sleep and food to eat. Tomorrow, Carrie and I will discuss what work she can do and what resources we can spare. And someone is going to teach me those hand signs so I can talk to you properly. Does that sound acceptable?" Ash's hands moved in a flurry of signs. Eric looked at Finn for translation, and Finn grinned. He says yes and thank you, and he promises to work hard when he's bigger, and he wants to know if you really mean it or if you're going to change your mind like everyone else did. Eric looked back at Ash. "I mean it. When I give my word, I keep it. That's what alphas do." For the first time since Carrie had met him, Ash smiled. Not the small, tentative smile from before, but a real one that lit his whole face. Finn squeezed his hand, his own face bright with relief and joy. "Sina," Eric said, standing, "get them settled. Guest quarters for tonight, and find healer Astrid. I want the boys checked over, make sure they're healthy." "Yes, Alpha." Sina gestured for them to follow her. As they left, Eric called out one more time. "Carrie." She turned back. "You did something brave, taking responsibility for a child that wasn't yours. That speaks well of your character. We'll find a place for you here." Carrie felt tears pricking at her eyes. "Thank you, Alpha Eric." You won't regret this. I know I won't. Eric returned to his desk, already dismissing them from his attention in the way of busy alphas. But Carrie saw the small smile on his face as they left, and she felt something unfurl in her chest that might have been hope. The guest quarters turned out to be a small cabin at the edge of the pack center, 2 rooms with a wood stove and actual beds. After sleeping on the ground for 2 nights, the simple mattresses felt like luxury. Cena brought them bread, cheese, and hot soup, then left them to eat in peace. Finn and Ash fell on the food like starving wolves, which Carrie supposed they were. She made them slow down, worried they'd make themselves sick, but she understood the desperation. She felt it too, the gnawing hunger that came from too many meals missed, too many days making do with too little. After they'd eaten, healer Astrid arrived. She was younger than healer Greta, maybe late 20s, with kind brown eyes and gentle hands. She checked all 3 of them over, tisking at how underweight they were, noting the circles under Carrie's eyes and the way Finn's ribs showed through his shirt. When she examined Ash, she spent extra time looking at his throat, his mouth, his ears. Physically he's fine, she announced, underweight like the others, but no illness, no injury. His vocal apparatus is completely intact. Can you help him speak again? Finn asked hopefully. Astrid smiled sadly. That's not a physical problem, young one. That's a problem of the heart and mind. Those take time to heal, and they can't be forced. But I'll check in on him regularly. Make sure he stays healthy while he heals in his own time. After Astrid left, Carrie got both boys washed and into bed. They protested. Finn because he wanted to stay up and plan everything they'd do tomorrow. Ash because he kept signing that he needed to repay their kindness by helping with chores. Tomorrow, Carrie promised. Tonight we rest, in real beds, without worrying about guards or rogues or being turned away. Can you do that for me? They finally agreed, and Carrie tucked them in together in one of the beds. They'd grown used to sleeping close for warmth, and neither seemed inclined to change that now. Within minutes, both boys were asleep, their breathing deep and even. Carrie sat by the stove and let herself cry. Quiet tears that she'd been holding back for days, for weeks, for the 2 years since her mate had died and her life had fallen apart. She cried for the fear she'd carried, for the uncertainty, for the desperate choices she'd had to make. And she cried with relief, because for the first time in so long, she felt safe. They had a place to sleep, food in their bellies, an alpha who looked at them and saw potential instead of burden. It wouldn't last, she knew. Nothing good ever lasted for people like her. But for tonight, for this one night, she let herself believe it might. Morning came with sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of the pack coming to life outside. Carrie woke to find both boys already up, Finn teaching Ash more signs using objects from around the cabin. Beta Cena arrived with breakfast, porridge with honey and actual fresh milk, and instructions for Carrie. Alpha Eric wants to see you this morning to discuss your placement. I'll watch the boys while you meet with him. Can they come with me? Carrie didn't want to leave them, not yet. Not when everything still felt so fragile. They'll be fine with me for an hour. I'll put them to work in the kitchens. Nothing hard, just sorting vegetables and learning where things are. Cena's expression softened slightly. Carrie, we don't hurt children here. They'll be safe. It was hard to leave them, but Carrie did. She followed Cena's directions to Alpha Eric's lodge and found him in his office, already knee-deep in paperwork despite the early hour. Carrie, sit. He gestured to a chair. I've been reviewing what work we need done and what skills you have. Beta Sigma tells me you mentioned cleaning, cooking, mending, and fieldwork. Yes, Alpha Eric, I can do all of those. I'm also good with animals if you need help with livestock, and I can read and write, if that's useful. Eric's eyebrows rose. You can read. That's rare for omegas from smaller packs. My mother taught me before she died. She said knowledge was the only thing no one could take away from you. Your mother was wise. Eric made a note on his papers. Here's what I'm thinking. We lost our head cook last winter to illness, and the current kitchen staff has been struggling. If you can manage a large kitchen and plan meals for a pack of 60 wolves, the position is yours. It comes with a small salary, room and board for you and both boys, and access to pack resources including the healers and teachers. Carrie stared at him. Head cook was not a low position. It came with responsibility and a measure of respect. Alpha Eric, I'm just an Omega. No pack, no status. Why would you give me such an important role? Because I need someone who can do the job, and I think you can. You've kept yourself and 2 children alive through hardship that would have broken weaker wolves. You took in a child that 6 packs rejected, not because you had resources to spare, but because it was the right thing to do. That shows character, Carrie. That shows strength. He leaned forward. I won't lie to you. Frost Ridge is struggling. We lost 20 wolves last winter to a respiratory illness that swept through the pack. We're short on warriors, on hunters, on skilled workers of all kinds. I need people who can work hard and care about the pack, not just themselves. Can you do that? Yes. Carrie's voice was firm. Yes, Alpha Eric, I can. Good. You'll start tomorrow. Today, rest, explore the pack center, let the boys get comfortable. Beta Cena will show you to your permanent quarters this afternoon. They're attached to the main kitchens, which will make your job easier. Carrie stood to leave, then hesitated. Alpha Eric, what about Ash? If the Northern Territories send someone demanding his return? Let me worry about that. I'm the Alpha here, and I decide who stays and who goes. Ash is under my protection now. Eric's voice was steel. No one takes him without going through me first. The relief Carrie felt was so intense, it made her dizzy. Thank you. Over the next weeks, they settled into their new life. The quarters Cena showed them were modest but comfortable. 2 bedrooms, a common area, and their own small kitchen, though Carrie spent most of her time in the main pack kitchens. The work was hard, but satisfying. Carrie had forgotten what it felt like to be useful, to have people depend on her for something vital. The kitchen staff, 3 other wolves and a rotating group of apprentices, were wary at first, but they warmed up when they realized Carrie knew what she was doing and didn't try to pull rank despite her new position. Finn and Ash became fixtures around the pack center. Finn had been enrolled in lessons with the other pack children, and he soaked up knowledge like a sponge. He excelled at everything from reading to tracking to pack history. The teachers praised his quick mind and his willingness to help other students who struggled. And wherever Finn went, Ash followed. The 2 had become inseparable, communicating in a hybrid of signs, gestures, and shared understanding that seemed almost telepathic. Finn had taken it upon himself to teach not just Ash, but anyone who would learn, the hand signs his father had taught him. It started small, just a few signs shared with the other children in their lessons. But soon, half the pack could sign basic words. Warriors learned signs for silent communication during hunts. Kitchen workers used them across noisy rooms. Even Alpha Eric had requested private lessons from Finn, and now he could hold simple conversations with Ash. Ash thrived under the attention. He put on weight, lost the hunted look in his eyes, started playing with other children. He still didn't speak, but no one seemed to mind. He communicated just fine, and the pack had adapted to his needs rather than demanding he adapt to theirs. 3 months after their arrival, Carrie was in the kitchens preparing evening meal when Finn burst through the door, his face bright with excitement. "Mama, Mama, come quick, you have to see this." Carrie's heart leapt into her throat. "What's wrong? Is Ash hurt?" "No, nothing's wrong, just come." Finn grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the door. Carrie followed him through the pack center to the training grounds, where a crowd had gathered. At the center of the crowd, Alpha Eric knelt in the dirt across from Ash, both of them focused intently on something between them. As Carrie got closer, she realized they were playing a game with stones, some kind of strategy game she didn't recognize. Ash's hands moved rapidly, signing his moves, and Eric responded in kind. They were both grinning, clearly enjoying themselves. "Watch," Finn whispered, pulling Carrie to a stop at the edge of the crowd. Ash made his move, placing a stone with careful precision. Eric studied the board, then looked up at Ash with exaggerated dismay. He signed something that made Ash's shoulders shake with silent laughter. Then Eric made an obviously bad move, and Ash immediately signed what must have been a correction, because Eric nodded and moved his stone to a different position. The game continued, and Carrie watched Ash's face. The wariness was gone. The fear that had marked him when they'd first met had vanished. In its place was joy, confidence, the natural playfulness of a child who felt safe enough to just be a child. Eric made a final move and spread his hands in a gesture of defeat. Ash's hands flew in signs too fast for Carrie to follow, but the meaning was clear. He'd won, and he was proud of himself. Eric ruffled Ash's hair fondly. "You're too good at this game. I need to find a more challenging opponent for you." Ash signed something, and Eric laughed. "You think you can beat Beta Cena? She's the champion. But I'll arrange a match if you're brave enough to challenge her." Ash nodded enthusiastically, then signed something else. Eric's expression softened. "Of course, your family can watch. Finn, Carrie." He looked up and met Carrie's eyes across the crowd. "You're invited to the championship match tomorrow. Ash insists on an audience for his inevitable victory." The crowd laughed, the sound warm and fond. These wolves had come to care for Ash, Carrie realized. He wasn't just tolerated or pitied. He was genuinely liked, valued as a member of the pack. That night, after the boys were in bed, there was a knock at Carrie's door. She opened it to find Alpha Eric standing there, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Do you have a moment?" he asked. "Of course, Alpha Eric." Carrie stepped aside to let him in, very aware of how small her quarters must seem to him, how modest her furnishings. But Eric didn't seem to notice. He sat at her small table and waited until she joined him. "I wanted to talk to you about Ash," he began. "About his future here." Carrie's stomach clenched. "Has something happened? Has the Northern Territory?" "No, nothing like that. Actually the opposite. I received a letter from Alpha Torn last week. Officially, it was confirming that Ash had been placed with Frost Ridgepack. Unofficially, it was thanking me for taking a problem off his hands." "Ash isn't a problem," Carrie said fiercely. "I know that. You know that. And after 3 months here, so does everyone in this pack." Eric leaned forward. "That's what I want to talk to you about. Carrie, Ash has no official status here. He's not formally part of any family, not claimed by any adult. He exists in a legal gray area that works for now, while he's young, but it will become problematic as he grows older." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying he needs a guardian. Someone to officially claim him, to be responsible for his well-being and his integration into the pack. And I think—" Eric paused, choosing his words carefully. "I think that person should be you." Carrie's breath caught. "Me? But I'm nobody. Just an Omega who cooks. Why would you let me claim a child when I have no status, no resources of my own?" "Because he's already yours," Eric said simply. "He has been since the day Finn sat down next to him and offered him a stone. You think I haven't noticed how he looks to you for permission before doing things? How he waits for you to come home from the kitchens each day, sitting by the window watching for you? How he calls you Mama when he signs to Finn when he thinks no one's watching?" Carrie felt tears burning in her eyes. "He does that? He does. And Finn calls him brother. You've already built a family, Carrie. I'm just offering to make it official." Eric pulled a paper from his pocket. "This is a formal adoption decree. If you sign it, Ash becomes your son in the eyes of the pack and the law. He gets your family name such as it is, He gets all the protections and rights that come with being your child. And when he's grown, he'll be a full pack member with all that entails. Carrie took the paper with shaking hands. The legal language was complex, but the meaning was clear. Ash would be hers. Truly, completely, legally hers. "What if I can't give him everything he needs?" she whispered. "What if I'm not enough?" "Carrie, you've already given him more than 6 packs combined ever could. You've given him safety, acceptance, and love. That's what children need most. The rest we figure out together." Eric stood. "Think about it. There's no rush. But if you decide to do it, the pack will support you. I give you my word on that." After he left, Carrie read the adoption decree over and over, until the words blurred from tears and exhaustion. Then she carefully folded it and tucked it under her pillow. The next day was the championship match between Ash and Beta Cena. Half the pack turned out to watch, making it a festival atmosphere. Someone had set up the game board on a raised platform so everyone could see, and there were even vendors selling snacks and drinks. Ash looked terrified and thrilled in equal measure. Finn stayed close to him, signing encouragement and making him laugh. When it was time to begin, Ash climbed onto the platform and sat across from Beta Cena, who grinned at him with fierce competitive joy. "Ready to lose, small one?" she signed. Ash signed back, and the crowd roared with laughter. Finn translated for those who couldn't read signs. "He says he's ready to teach you some humility." The game was intense. Cena played seriously, giving Ash no quarter, and he rose to meet her skill with a strategic mind that belied his age. The crowd was riveting, cheering both players, offering commentary, gasping at particularly clever moves. In the end, Cena won, but barely. Ash had pushed her harder than anyone expected, and when she offered him her hand to shake, she was smiling with genuine respect. "Well played," she signed. "In a few years, when you've practiced more, I think you'll beat me." Ash signed something back that made Cena throw back her head and laugh. "He says," Finn translated, "that he'll beat you next month, not in a few years." The crowd applauded both players as they climbed down from the platform. Ash was immediately surrounded by pack members, congratulating him, ruffling his hair, signing praise. He glowed under the attention, his whole face alight. Carrie watched from the edge of the crowd, her heart so full it hurt. This was what Ash had needed all along, not to be fixed or changed, but to be accepted, to be given the tools to communicate and then allowed to be himself. Finn appeared at her elbow, looking thoughtful. "Mama, can I ask you something?" "Of course, baby. Are we going to stay here? Forever, I mean. Is this our home now?" Carrie looked around at the pack center, at the wolves who'd welcomed them, at Ash being hoisted onto someone's shoulders and paraded around like a champion. She thought about the adoption papers tucked under her pillow, about Alpha Eric's words, about the life they were building. "Yes," she said firmly. "This is our home. All 3 of us." Finn's face split in a grin so wide it looked almost painful. "Good, because I already told Ash we were brothers, and I'd never leave him, and I really didn't want to be a liar." That night, Carrie signed the adoption papers. In the morning, she brought them to Alpha Eric's office and handed them over without a word. Eric read them, nodded, and added his own signature as Alpha and witness. "Congratulations! You're now the official mother of 2 sons. Thank you, Alpha Eric, for everything. Don't thank me. You did this yourself. You took a chance on a child everyone else had given up on, and you proved them all wrong." Eric stood and clasped her hand. "Tonight, we'll announce it formally at the pack gathering. Ash will be welcomed as a full member of Frost Ridge Pack, and of your family." The pack gathering was held in the Great Hall, with every pack member in attendance. Alpha Eric stood before them and spoke of family, of acceptance, of the strength that came from caring for those who needed it most. Then he called Carrie, Finn, and Ash to stand before the pack. Ash looked terrified, hiding half behind Carrie, but Finn took his hand and squeezed. "This pack has suffered losses," Eric said, "but it has also gained. 3 months ago, Carrie came to us with nothing but determination and love for her son. She asked for a chance and we gave it. In return, she served us well, kept our bellies full, and brought new life to our kitchens." He turned to Ash. "And this young one came to us mute, but not voiceless, needing acceptance, but not pity. He's taught us new ways to communicate, shown us that strength comes in many forms, and reminded us that children are always worth investing in." Eric pulled out the adoption decree. "Tonight, by the authority vested in me as Alpha of Frost Ridge Pack, I recognize Carrie's claim on Ash. From this moment forward, he is her son-in-law and in truth, he carries her family name. He is Pack." The hall erupted in howls of approval. Wolves banged on tables, stomped their feet, voiced their acceptance of Ash as one of them. The sound was overwhelming, primal, beautiful. Ash's eyes went wide. His hands began to move in signs. "Thank you, thank you, thank you," over and over. Finn wrapped his arms around him, and Ash clung back. Then Ash did something no one expected. He looked up at Carrie, his eyes swimming with tears and his mouth opened. A sound came out, rough, rusty, barely more than a whisper after 8 months of silence. "Mama?" The hall went absolutely silent. Every wolf froze, staring at Ash in shock. Ash tried again, the word coming easier this time. "Mama?" Carrie dropped to her knees and pulled him into her arms, sobbing. Ash wrapped his arms around her neck and pressed his face against her shoulder, and she could feel him shaking with the effort of speaking after so long. "You talked," Finn breathed, his own eyes wet. "Ash, you talked." Ash pulled back enough to look at Finn, and another word emerged, shaky but clear. "Brother." The hall exploded again, this time with cheering. Wolves rushed forward to congratulate them, to touch Ash's hair for luck, to welcome him properly, now that he could welcome them back. But Ash only had eyes for Carrie and Finn. He looked between them, these two people who'd chosen him when no one else would, who'd built him a family from nothing but determination and love. And he smiled that beautiful, bright smile that transformed his whole face. Later that night, after the celebration had ended, and they were back in their quarters, Carrie tucked both boys into bed. They were exhausted from the excitement, from the emotion, from the sheer weight of belonging after so long feeling unwanted. "Mama," Ash said, the words still rough but getting smoother with each use. "Love you." Carrie kissed his forehead, then Finn's. "I love you both, my sons, my family." "Best family ever," Finn mumbled, already half asleep. Ash nodded his agreement and curled against Finn's side. Within minutes, both boys were asleep, breathing in the slow, deep rhythm of children who felt completely safe. Carrie sat watching them in the dim light from the fire. She thought about the council chamber where they'd been rejected, about the forest path where Ash had caught up to them with his too big satchel, about all the moments of fear and uncertainty that had led them here. Every pack had rejected the mute pup, seeing only his silence and never his strength. They'd looked at him and seen a burden, a problem, something broken that couldn't be fixed. But Finn had seen a friend. A person who just needed someone to meet him where he was, to communicate in ways that worked for him, instead of demanding he change to suit them. And in teaching Ash to sign, in learning his language and teaching it to others, Finn had given him more than just a way to communicate. He'd given him a voice that was uniquely his own, one that didn't require sound to be heard. Ash would probably always prefer signs to speech. He might never be a big talker, might never howl with the pack during ceremonies. But he'd found his voice in his own way, on his own timeline, and he'd found a family who loved him exactly as he was. That was more than enough. It was everything. Carrie pulled a blanket over both boys and banked the fire for the night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work, the daily business of pack life. But tonight, in this moment, Everything was perfect. They were home, they were family, they were pack, and they were never going to be alone again.